what we can accomplish in the time that we can accomplish in generally blows away the stuff of science fiction. So that's the problem. You have to think bigger than that, right? So for me, I just like to look out maybe 2, 3 years ahead and kind of like try to match up the patterns that I'm seeing.
Yeah, no, well, you guys are a fair way down the path compared to where I am. That's for sure. And already have a solid track record that gives you a bit more street cred as well. But I suppose one thing that floats in my mind as you're talking there is when people are doing something that's a physical pursuit, then people can see them, I guess, bulk up over time, right? Whereas when you're doing something where you're learning and you're educating yourself and you're potentially practicing, bar whether or not, I suppose, they tune into what you're putting online, if you're putting things online, people don't know what you're learning. And that's one of the things that when I've been wanting to put together, I guess, a little bit of a video to put on my Flicks for Good landing page that sort of talks a bit about who is Brad Houston and why does this guy, this dude who just lives on the Sunshine Coast and went and ditched his perfectly functional corporate career to pursue a career in film and video production, why is he now thinking he's going to start a video streaming service that would potentially rival Netflix, and he's going to do it all off the donations of people who believe in the mission and, like you're saying, want to be part of doing something and doing something that hasn't been done before. So that this kind of grassroots thing. And one thought I had, and maybe this is just a little bit of a chip on my shoulder or my kind of thing of, I never went to university, but and my two older sisters were really academic. They loved school. And they liked doing their assignments, all those sorts of things. And I would rather go and I don't know, like I like doing lots of ridiculous things and, blowing stuff up and going to the pub and what have you. I still actually did okay, really, in school, and that ruffled a few feathers because I, ended up with a score that was better than some of the other people who were, I guess in my class, and I didn't really put a lot of effort into it. But I would say for maybe at least 10 years, I completely underestimated and undervalued my own intelligence. And so this is part of why I want to show other people in whatever way it may be that there are ways that you can learn and that you can actually succeed, and maybe you're not as dumb as you think you are, and maybe some of the people who think they're so smart aren't as smart as they think they are. I think we're fortunately now coming to a point, and I think video and podcasts and things like that have really done a lot for people who didn't gel well with school. I mean, and people like Gary V, openly state that story. But nonetheless, I kind of feel like I still want to show people, hey, I didn't go to uni, but I've spent all this time learning about stuff. I wanted to create like a little animation video that perhaps shows the different kind of pillars of information that I've been acquiring through YouTube, through podcasts, through attending things, through just doing stuff and experimenting, to kind of go, hey, this actually all adds up to something, to show I don't have a certificate, but I've learnt a bucket load. Now, one of the other questions that I have for you, and I'm conscious now that time is whittling whittling away here, and I really value the time that we have. Some of the areas that you're focused on in terms of the 21st century skills with design thinking, problem solving, all sorts of different areas, lead me to think that maybe you're thinking that our economy and the way that people earn a living down the line is going to be radically different. Well, I'm sure you're already thinking that. I mean, we know that with automation, robotics, AI, all those different things coming. I have a theory, and I suppose I started thinking about this when I was working in recruitment and in that kind of space. But I have a theory, and I'm interested to know what you think on this. But I have a theory that potentially we're going to get to a stage where the machines and AI and all those sorts of things are able to do so many things that people used to do that we get whittled back to our core essence, which I actually think is a good thing. And I see it happening around the world in different ways. And we have to just embrace who we are as a person, because the only thing that's truly unique in this world is ourselves, and that we kind of become, for lack of better terminology, the commodity. So that people will need to be doing something that's either educating, entertaining, informing. What are your thoughts? Do you think that, and maybe why I like to think this is that I think, okay, well, this is potentially the new gold rush, and the people like you and like myself that taking the time to try and learn the ins and outs of video production and live streaming, whatever it might be, and creating content, are kind of the new pioneers in this 21st century. Do you think that potentially everybody's going to end up becoming some form of performer or educator?
I'm not sure about that. And I know this is going to sound strange for a guy who named his company The Future, but I'm not much of a futurist.
Okay. Yeah.
Predicting the future is the job for professionals, I think, who sit there and try to dream something in 50 years, what's going to happen. And then they said the biggest challenge is the limitation of the human mind, because what we can accomplish in the time that we can accomplish in generally blows away the stuff of science fiction. So that's the problem. You have to think bigger than that, right? So for me, I just like to look out maybe 2, 3 years ahead and kind of like try to match up the patterns that I'm seeing. And we see that we're becoming an increasingly digital society through digital interfaces, like how you and I are talking together. We're not obviously in the same room or even in the same time zone, but we're able to connect and talk. So there's going to be need for developers who can make these things happen, for the people to dream up the ideas of what needs to happen, and for creative designer types to fashion the experience so it's intuitive and powerful. Those three parts have to come together. So it's vision, design, and execution, whether you call that programming, development, or whatever. That's usually what that is. So if you play in those three spaces, now the pyramid on this is not stacked evenly. The people who have the vision are small, relatively speaking. The people who can design and shape experiences are smaller, and the labor force to produce that is much, much bigger. So it's kind of like some shape of a pyramid. How steep it tapers, I do not know. Then it gets into the second thing that we know, that we're becoming an increasingly dematerialized culture, that we spend more money for experiences to have fewer physical things. Like if we were to take the average weight of the things we consume and keep, it's going down and it's going to keep trending that way. I mentioned the iPhone before. The iPhone is just a perfect example of this, that it replaces so many other things, right? It can carry more than 1,000 songs in your pocket, as the original iPod could. It contains a GPS. It contains maps and a dictionary, and now a translation device. So it's getting rid of a lot of things, and it's displacing whole industries and companies. Some people, their only access to the internet and computing power is actually through their smartphone. It depends on where you are in the world. So there's that part of it. The last part is, if AI is able to, and through robotics and automation, do mundane, repetitive tasks, it will free society up to not do those things anymore. I think those things are a tremendous waste of human potential and capital. So we get to sit around and we can become philosophers, artists, musicians. We can truly, everybody can be an artist if they want to be. And I think that's where it gets really, really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fascinating time to be alive. Uh, sometimes I sometimes I love it, and sometimes I hate it. I don't know. I'm sort of a bit of a strange character, because I openly voiced this before, but I think I'm kind of part hippie, part tech junkie. So there's part of me that loves new technology and what's evolving and seeing things and jumping on board with stuff. So I'm definitely probably an early adopter, and I've spent a lot of my career in sales and selling technology solutions that were fairly cutting edge. So I've got that side. But then I have another side where I just kind of feel like I want to just run off naked into the woods, you know, and just kind of go off the grid and just have a life. Often ponder what I would have been thinking about if we didn't live in the era we live in, because it's not that long ago where you might have just only known the village that you're in. So the human mind, I believe, would have still had the same capacity, but you just wouldn't have this non-stop stream of information. Literally, most of us are, face to phone, consuming content and information. So it's a tricky thing to find, I guess, the right balance. So coming back to the future and your courses and those sorts of things, how does that typically function? Like, will someone have, say, like a 6-month course that they would do? Is it really modular? Do people do it in 12-month pieces, or they do it at their own pace? How do people normally go through?
It depends on which program that they participate in. Some are, and most of them are self-directed. There's very few courses that we actually construct and sell where you're getting a live real-time feedback, because that's the biggest cost. And in our mission to try to teach as many people and make it as affordable and accessible to as many people as possible, we have to make whatever tools we create totally scalable. So for the most part, these are self-contained, self-study courses that you can take a la carte. There isn't a prerequisite to take the Stylescape class before you take the brand messaging class. We think there's a logical progression, but we still admittedly have many gaps to fill before somebody can say end to end, here's one path, here's one track, take this and then take this, et cetera, so that there's this clear learning pathway like you do in most universities. We're not there. So we're doing it piecemeal, and the way that we construct our classes is based on our feeling of the demand and need for such products. So when we get a lot of questions about pricing, we'll create a pricing course. A lot of questions about brand manuals. Okay, we'll create a brand manual guide. That's how we do things. And we just kind of fill out first what we think is needed, and then we'll kind of backfill the rest of the catalog. We still have quite a ways to go. I think we're probably about 3 years away from where I would feel comfortable saying, I think we have a pretty good catalog that you can realistically say, I would choose to go to the school of the future or go to typical university to study design. And hopefully at that point, we've built up a pretty solid system of sales, of like onboarding teachers and how to teach classes, et cetera, so that it's a pretty well-oiled machine at that point. And then we can really scale so that now foundation work has been done. We can really get into other creative fields and then non-creative fields.
Yeah. So I noticed that on the website you talked about eliminating the biggest barriers to education and naming those as cost, time, and accessibility. I was interested to know whether within accessibility, is that also including the medium? And that kind of comes back a little bit to what I was saying with regards to how I learn and my own journey and how I didn't like academia, but I love watching stuff on YouTube and I love listening to podcasts. So have you kind of tackled that barrier, or do you think that purely via the mechanism of delivering it through video and online and podcast tackles the barrier?
I'm not sure just yet, but I think if money were not a problem and I could hire everybody that I need and have the ultimate resources that I need, I don't think it's purely video. I don't think it's a purely digital experience. So we know of subscription programs like Birchbox or something like that, where somebody sends you a kit tailored for your needs every single month. It's a subscription plan, meal plans, those kinds of things. I think there should be an educational subscription box where, depending on which learning outcome or path you want to go down, every 2 weeks we send you a self-contained kit, kind of like a Lego thing, where you rip open one package and then you do what it tells you to do and you learn something through experience. And then you open the second one and then it asks you a question. So these are all games and toys or puzzles designed to teach you very complicated ideas. We don't have that capability. We're not anywhere near that, but I think that could be a really great way to learn, because most creative people don't learn by somebody else telling them what to do and what not to do. They learn because they've done it themselves. And I remember I pretty much have grown up into to getting an undergraduate degree is I've gone to public school, and America is not known to have the highest class standards of public education. But I do remember a handful of teachers and classes where those lessons stick with me to this day. And most of them took an atypical, unusual way of teaching, very assignment driven, or asking us in a Socratic way what we know and to prove what we know and to really engage us on a philosophical, intellectual level. And those are the stickiest. The ones that ask us to listen and memorize and regurgitate, those are pretty much have all faded away.